Hello and welcome to Pensions in 10 with me, David Brooks, and my colleague, Sadhbh Lynch. This week, we take a look at transfer times and consolidation in the DC space, and we also look at what's happening in inheritance tax and the latest news there. Okay, Sadhbh, our first story of today, we're going to look at where the FCA have been reporting on transfer times, and obviously there's a mixed reaction to this. Some people are frustrated with those times, but there's also some justification for that as well. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I was reading a bit over the weekend, and with this, they found that basically 3/4 of cases are being done in an average of around 20 days, so actually much quicker than I think a lot of people expected. The main issues that I was seeing, though, that weren't really reflective of the times of the cases are to do with short-term incentives. So if you think about when you're transferring between different pension schemes, maybe you've moved company, you've got a new pension scheme and you want to try and consolidate some things. Some of these companies are offering short-term incentives. So saying like, oh, if you transfer over your pension scheme to us, we can give you X amount of thousand now in order for you to have custom with us rather than your previous DC firm that you were with. So I think this is quite dangerous because obviously if you're trying to compare like a short-term imminent £3,000 into your pension pot versus these other benefits that you get from other providers, it can be quite challenging. So I think they were saying that often people leave providers with lower fees or better tax-free cash options at retirement, and then they go into these new providers with, even though they get this initial cash bonus, then over the long run they're actually getting less of a benefit because they're having to pay these higher fees. So there's definitely some worries around this, but I think a better standardization of information and value for money should help hopefully people make the right decisions when it comes to consolidation.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there is this sort of belief, and you kind of get it in the sense, and I talk to members from time to time out and about in the real world, and even friends and family and stuff. When you talk about pensions, they will often say that, oh, I should consolidate. It's almost such a strong message out there in the market that if you've got multiple pots, then you should be consolidating them. That's a good thing to do. And I'm not really ever too sure of the motivation for this. I think the big one probably is just ease of admin. You don't have to remember one password and all that kind of stuff, and seeing all your money in one place. You haven't got to remember, oh, I've got X thousand there and Y thousand over there and whatever. So I can see that, but as you hint, with these incentives, sometimes there's a bigger picture at play with options and ongoing charges that people could be making suboptimal choices based on these other, which would be quite second order issues. I think if you were to sit down with an advisor and decide whether you're going to transfer from one DC fund to another, there'd be a lot of things to think about, not just is it easy to remember your password and know you're going to get some money in your pocket now. I mean, there's a lot more to it, and I think I think the FCA probably needs to do a little bit more in that area around the incentives and around those sort of softer areas. But also, I suppose we're hopeful that the dashboard will come along and help in some ways. We'll have to wait and see how some of the commercial dashboards work with regards to encouraging consolidation again. So I think that's definitely an area we need to be careful of. But if you can see all of your funds in one place, then that should maybe possibly reduce the requirement to, or the desire to consolidate all your pots in one place, because you can see them on that dashboard. You still need to remember your passwords and all that sort of stuff, but maybe that's just life, and we all need to get better at that anyway.
Yeah, I think it would be good if they had just some more standardized information, because if you're logging on to see your pensions and you have to compare something that's right now versus decades in the future, it's so difficult for anyone to consider different factors to know which one is more beneficial.
Yeah.
So I think it is quite hard, and they need to come up with some sort of information for members so that if they're logging in and they have to make this decision, that they can actually make the correct decision and be well informed.
Yeah, it could be interesting to require some kind of modelling thing, maybe. So if you see
Exactly.
where you are, you've got a X% chance of being here and the same percent chance of being there on two different plans. Maybe there does need to be some kind of thing. And also, we need to be considerate of scams and those kind of things. You saying the 20 days, that doesn't sound so bad. I know some people call for 10 days, and the technology is fantastic. We can move money around and do this sort of stuff very quickly. But we do need to be careful of people's pension funds. We're always worried about how big they are. They're not big enough. But if if you've got any money is going to be someone's nest egg for their retirement. If we play fast and loose with it and allow people to transfer quickly as well, then we do raise the risk of scams as well. So I'm not so concerned about people. I know people get frustrated, people get lose trust in the pension system, but I think the trust would be worse if you could just play fast and loose, cash out
Yeah.
from one provider, go into something else, which turns out to be a scam and lose everything. I think we always need to be cognizant of that bad outcome as well.
Right, Dave, so do you want to bring us through the clarification on inheritance tax within pensions?
Yeah, okay, so this is related to what we know as the ongoing consultation around bringing pensions into the realms of inheritance tax from April 2027. And there was a clarification that the Treasury have issued the last few days, basically that if someone passes away before normal minimum pension age, so currently 55, going up to 57 in a couple of years, that those unused funds will still be subject to inheritance tax, those unused pension funds. Again, because the policy design is that unused pension funds will fall into scope for inheritance tax. Obviously, it feels a little bit harsh on these people because you can't spend your money before normal minimum pension age except in very exceptional circumstances. And so for most people, that money was always going to be unused because you can't pay it. So I accept that it kind of feels a bit unusual, but I still think, I think that that's kind of fair enough as a simplification of the system. I don't think it's a major issue, as not many people, thankfully, die before 55 anyway, and the number of exemptions and the bandings and these kind of things will mean that I think 90% of people won't get anywhere near paying a tax charge anyway. So I do feel for some of the people, perhaps. I mean, there is an argument, I suppose, that we made around death and service lump sums, and people who die young, perhaps that should be exempt, and it is now exempt. So death and service lump sums are exempt, and you could argue these people are in that boat a little bit. But again, I don't really feel it's a major issue. I don't think it's something that the Treasury are going to move on. I think that is the way it's going to work. And I think some of the rhetoric around the inheritance tax application for pensions is slightly overblown. That we're seeing, I've seen people over the weekend on LinkedIn, for instance, saying that this is another issue for pensions, trust in pensions. People are going to opt out of their pension schemes because they're concerned about inheritance tax and these kind of stuff. I just don't see many people doing that at all. I mean, if you're rich and you've got lots of money in a pension already, then fine, maybe saving more into a pension isn't the most optimal thing for your estate. But for most of us, we're saving as much as we can afford for our retirement in the future. And if so happens the sad thing occurs and we die before we can get that money, then inheritance tax applies. I'm not going to be changing my plans because inheritance tax might apply to my pension at some point in the future. I need some money in my pension so I can stop working. I'll probably still do pensions in 10, but there has to be a day when I will stop working in the future, and I still think a pension is the best way, even if you have this potential risk for inheritance tax to apply.
Yeah, I think a lot of concerns were raised which seemed larger than probably the magnitude of who it's going to apply to. I think obviously you can understand where they're coming from, but considering the way it's structured, I just don't think it's actually going to affect too many people. And obviously if it does, very rightly so, you'd be annoyed at the change. But yeah, I think it's probably not as widespread as people were discussing over the weekend.
Yeah, and here we are discussing it, but anyway.
Yeah.
It feels like a big enough issue around, and there's some other things going around the application of income tax and then inheritance tax. That does feel like something that the government should probably look at, getting income tax on something and then inheritance tax as well. I'm not sure how that works. I suppose you could argue income has inheritance tax, and then it goes into your estate, and then that gets inheritance tax on it potentially. So I can see the rationale there, but sometimes the ratcheting up of some of the tax rates do seem unfair. So I'm not expecting the revenues to do anything about it, but I do accept that in some cases it might feel harsh on people.
Thanks everyone for listening and watching, and make sure you tune back in next week with Dave for another Pensions in 10.